needs and what you want to see Israel do, then let me press you a little bit more about Egypt's own role. Because we've watched, over time, it's a historical fact that there's been a tendency for Israel to offload Gaza onto you, but in response, Egypt has wanted to make sure that Israel is seen as the accountable occupying force and then has to play that role in managing the situation in Gaza. But things have changed fundamentally in the last 2 years that also put a burden back onto Cairo in terms of the role that you have to play in not distancing yourself from the realities that are confronting Gaza, but playing a more forceful, playing a more assertive role into Gaza, one that really shows that you are not going to stand by to allow people to be forcefully displaced, but you are going to take a firmer stand. What does that look like practically within the context of the resolution, within the context of the Board of Peace, and within the context of the Technocratic Committee as well?
Well, as you all know, according to the Trump peace plan, it has two important points: no annexation of the West Bank and no displacement. And that's why we accepted the Trump peace plan, and it's very important to focus on that, and it's attached to the Security Council Resolution 2803. Egypt will save no efforts but in their homeland and to help them, of course, to build their own state. There is no solution or sustainable security and stability for Israel or for the Middle East without the state. This is the only game in town. A part of that, all will be temporary solutions. And support Gaza with the humanitarian aid. 70% of all assistance entered into Gaza offered by the people of Egypt and the government of Egypt from all over the world. We are talking about more than 600,000 tons of humanitarian and medical aid into Gaza. We will continue to do that. It's our responsibility, but again, Egypt is not going to govern Gaza, and no single country will govern Gaza, but only the Palestinians, they will govern themselves.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister Espen, can I go back to my very first opening question about what do we need, or what would the one thing that you would like to see to make sure that we don't get into a situation of no war, no peace, that we see a freezing scenario? How do we avoid that type of conundrum if we want to get out of the mess that we're seeing in Gaza, and where you're seeing the very dire state of lives facing Gazans? What do we need to see happen over the next coming weeks?
Thank you, Comfort. First, I want to say that I agree with everything that my two colleagues, both Abdelati and Alvarez, just said. So I'm not going to say that again, just register that. But to your specific question, I think the number one answer is get the sequencing right and get these institutions into place. Because the 20-point plan, which we all supported because all of us were in Sharm el-Sheikh together and gave our imprimatur on this Trump plan, the plan says many of the right things, but it's not very clear what happens first and what happens next. Yes, there are phases, but that means that the different parties can always say, I will do my part, but only when he has done his part, and vice versa. That's a problem. So we need to work on the sequencing, and we need to get these these temporary government institutions, the International Security Force, and the Board of Peace in place this month, because it's very urgent. And you are so right, Comfort, because we are now in a very fragile ceasefire, and we can either go forward or backward. I don't think we can stay many more weeks in this situation. The alternative is back to war, or descent into total anarchy, or we move forward. And I think those are the key answers to that question. Get the sequencing right, get the institutions in place. And as Brother Abdelati very rightly said, they are temporary, and people need to know today that they are temporary and that they are on the path towards real Palestinian governance under the PA.
Can we just zoom in, because the sequencing issue is always a conundrum in any peace process, and you've been involved in various peace processes, and it's very true that it matters how you sort of weave things together as well. But let's zoom in on the International Stabilization Force. The minister put a spotlight on the role of Israel, but Israel is also seeking one issue around decommissioning, disarmament. Now, short of using force, how else are you going to do that? And how do you begin to put a force together where you're asking people to fight? Who wants to put themselves, or which country is about to mandate its own forces to go into the kind of situation where, you know, you've got Hamas on one side and Israel on the other side, and the real demand in the room is around decommission? How do you begin to do that? What does sequencing look like with that reality as well?
So a week ago, I met the foreign minister of a large Muslim country who has said that they're ready to provide a large number of troops. But he very understandably said, what are the rules of engagement? What is the exact mandate? What are these troops going to go do? Because I have to tell my people what they're going to prepare their troops for. And that answer is not very clear. Exactly as, are they actually going to try to go down to the tunnels and fight Hamas? Or are they going to work with a Palestinian temporary authority where Hamas will actually voluntarily hand in their weapons and demobilize, which they have said they're ready to do when the institutions are in place. So it's back to the sequencing issue. And I think, frankly, it's very unlikely that we will get any consensus on an international force that will do the job of physically disarming Hamas against their will. It has to be part of a broader understanding. And to the extent you need something like that, I think it has to be Palestinian. And that's a hard sell, but I think that is one of the questions that we need to clarify very soon in order to get anywhere here. And then the International Stabilization Force will be a peacekeeping force, overlooking, reporting, making sure that this progresses, but where the key actors have to be Palestinians, including that new transitional governance, and the police officers that have actually been trained in Egypt, ready to go in when time is right.
Thank you. I'll come back to ask you a further question, but actually let me. There's another question that I have at the top of my mind. This has very much been described as an American peace plan, and each of you have had a role to play in getting us to Sharm el-Sheikh as well. And I wanted to ask you specifically, Minister, about whether this plan itself, because it's seen as an American plan, whether that itself is a challenge in terms of the progress going forward in getting it to be internationally acceptable, or whether you think the fact that you've got a major player like the United States gives it the necessary leverage, strength that it requires to get it past the first two phases as well.
So, Comfort, my answer to that is yes, it's an American plan, which is a good thing, because that's why this could be, President Trump could speak with a strong voice to Netanyahu that he had to accept this plan. So it needed to be an American plan, but it picks up key elements of an Arab plan, which Jose Manuel and I have been supporting, but the main actors are our regional friends, and this has been very much what Spain and Norway and Slovenia and Ireland saw, that we needed to link up to a very promising initiative among a number of Arab and Muslim countries to come forward with this element of this plan. So when we all met in New York a month or two before the ceasefire, we spelled out some more elements of this plan, and this is not identical to the Trump plan, but there are elements in the Trump plan that you can recognize from that plan. Could it have been better? Yes, it could be more specific on timelines and sequence, but it's much better than any realistic alternative that has been on the table in a manner that could be implemented. So I think there have been many many contributors to getting us to where we are, but it was important that President Trump himself, in person, was convinced that there was something to build on from this idea that you can't just stop the war in Gaza and believe the problem is solved. There is a deeper problem. This is one of many wars. At best, this particular war in Gaza is over. There have been many. But the deeper underlying conflict is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that is only beginning to be solved at best. And here is why we need to build this bridge from the immediate need of stopping this war and feeding people and getting the sort of key infrastructure in place in order to build a political solution which will take away the cause for new wars.
I mean, thank you. That's a really nice way to segue to Minister Manuel, because one of the roles that Saudi Arabia has been focused on is the notion of a two-state solutions and the global alliance that you've been working with France and other countries of the global south to make sure that we don't lose sight of the original focus of the Arab Peace Initiative that your country has driven as well. Are the two compatible today? The Trump 20-point peace plan, the resolution that was signed by the Security Council, does that framework sit side by side very well with that global alliance for a two-state solution? Or do you think that it's now become a challenge? The reason I raise it is that there's a sense in which that original idea may have been watered down or become vaguer within the context of the 20-point peace plan.
Well, thank you, Comfort. And, I want to first start by thanking the State of Qatar and commending them for this very important forum, which is a demonstration and a testimony to Qatar's role in bringing stability and security not only to our part of the world, but the whole world at large. And thank you also for International Crisis Group for the great work that you've been doing. I want to correct one thing, and I want to say the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution is an idea that came out after many different diplomatic efforts. Spain has led the way beforehand, and the Global Alliance is actually between Norway, Saudi Arabia, and the EU, and even that Saudi Arabia's partner in this as a chair of the Arab OIC. So it brings in a lot of partners into this. And I want to say that the Global Alliance has centered around the idea of implementation and around the fact that almost everyone in the international community agrees that the two-state solution is the only solution forward. So if that is so,